Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. Welcome to May and to another History News Roundup video. There is a playlist of the previous Roundup videos that this one will be added to and that I will be leaving linked in a card and also in the description box. We do have some updates to previous headlines in today's video, so hopefully the playlist will make it easier to reference back if you should choose to do so. With all that being said, let's look at the history headlines from last month. First up, I need to offer a correction or clarification to a throwaway remark I made in the last of these Roundup videos. When talking about the Cave of Horrors, I said that I didn't think it got its name from anything ghosty, corpsey or cursey, but rather from how difficult it was to access. While this was obviously hilarious, further reading has shown that it's also not correct. While it wasn't corpsey, it certainly was skeleton-y. Gareth Wern, writing for The Conversation, explains that the cave was first explored in 1955 and that the nickname Cave of Horror was given to the cave because of a large number of skeletons, including children's skeletons that were found inside. Together with the skeletons were personal documents, a fragmentary copy of a prayer written in Hebrew, and a scroll to which these fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls belong, which was hidden at the back of the cave. Remains of a Roman camp at the top of the cliff suggests the refugees sheltering there died as a result of a Roman siege. The occupants were determined not to surrender. There were no signs of wounds on the skeletons, suggesting the occupants died as a result of hunger and thirst, or possibly smoke inhalation from a fire in the centre of the cave. What I remain unclear on, however, is how these caves were accessed by people thousands of years ago. I will keep looking into it though, but if anyone has a book or article that might point me in the right direction, I'd be very grateful if you could let me know about it. We have a number of updates about the future of the Benin bronzes. It certainly seems to me that the moves being made by the German government and the University of Aberdeen, which made the news in March and that I discussed in last month's video, have motivated other institutions to act similarly. The Church of England has announced that it is currently in discussions about the return of two bronze busts that were gifted to Lambeth Palace in 1982. This move has come about after they were contacted by the Digital Benin project, which is working to locate and digitally network the objects looted from the Kingdom of Benin by British colonial occupiers in February 1897. There are believed to be around 3,000 to 5,000 pieces that have been dispersed across the globe. Digital Benin is set to launch in 2022. The Hornemann Museum and Gardens is also currently in possession of 49 pieces from Benin. They have created a new policy document that, they say, includes, quote, transparent policies and procedures by which communities in Africa can enter into discussion with the museum about the future of this material, including its possible return. Requests for restitution and repatriation will, they state, be handled on a case-by-case basis. They also explained that as of the 7th of April 2021, they had received no repatriation requests, so no discussions have occurred so far. The issue of repatriation is apparently more complicated for some institutions than others. A spokesperson from the Hornemann states, quote, we may also need advice about whether we have the legal right to return the cultural artefact. For example, we need to be able to demonstrate that we own it, and it is not on loan from another owner. In many cases, the advice of the Charity Commission will need to be sought. Gareth Harris, writing for the Art newspaper, offers further context, explaining, "The British Museum in London, which holds more than 900 Benin objects, and other national institutions such as the Victoria and Albert Museum, are prevented from permanently returning items by the British Museum Act 1963 and the Heritage Act 1983. Regional museums in the UK, which are not bound by such legal constraints, can, in theory, return objects more quickly. Any Benin bronzes that are currently held in private collections will, I would assume, be harder to trace for digital Benin. Owners will have to choose to be transparent or even volunteer information, unless they choose to sell an item, as it seems one owner is finding out. The Times ran a story about Burstow and Hewitt auctioneers in Sussex, and the fact that they have removed a Benin bronze from sale after its provenance was questioned by an expert. Reports state that the vendor is considering the repatriation of this plaque, where the estimated value is quoted as being between £10,000 and £15,000. An ancient city has been rediscovered by archaeologists working near Luxor in Egypt. It has been determined that this is the Lost Golden City, built by Amenhotep III 3 millennia ago. Amenhotep III ruled between 1386 and 1353 BCE. Excavations have found, quote, "a large city in a good condition of preservation, with almost complete walls, and with rooms filled with tools of daily life. Several neighbourhoods have been uncovered, including a bakery complete with ovens and storage pottery, as well as administrative and residential districts. The buildings contain a trove of items that Betsy Bryan, Professor of Egyptian Art and Archaeology at Johns Hopkins University, said, will give us a rare glimpse into the life of the ancient Egyptians, at the time where the empire was at its wealthiest. Indeed, she has called the find the second most important archaeological discovery since the tomb of Tutankhamun." This is one of a number of discoveries to be announced by Egyptian authorities since the start of 2021, which include the discovery of a mummy with a gold tongue, a 13-foot Book of the Dead scroll, and 110 ancient Egyptian tombs along the Nile Delta, most of which predate the Pharaonic period. All of these finds will no doubt prove immensely useful for Egypt's tourism industry as they strive to encourage people to visit in the aftermath of the events of the last year and a bit. Reuters reported that the number of tourists who visited the country dropped from 13.1 million in 2019 to 3.5 million in 2020. No doubt, Egypt will be keen to see those numbers increasing. Next up, we are heading to a Neolithic site that has been excavated near Loftus, Yorkshire. Archaeologists have uncovered the oldest salt-making complex to have been found so far in Western Europe, which is serving to shift the understanding of Britain's economy and how it operated around 6,000 years ago. This new find suggests that the economy was larger and more efficient than had been previously thought. The salt manufacturing process is now understood to have begun around 2,400 years earlier too. By producing their own salt from seawater, the Neolithic people of this region would have had reason to increase the number of cattle they bred and reared. Salt would have allowed them to preserve any meat. They could also, it is thought, have further supported their economy by trading in the salt they made. A collection of Arabian coins, minted in the 17th century, have been uncovered in New England in recent years, and it is being suggested that these finds might provide a solution to a centuries-old mystery involving pirates. On the 7th of September 1695, Captain Henry Every used his pirate ship, the Fancy, to rob a ship belonging to the Indian Emperor. In the process of gaining access to the gold and silver, the piratical crew tortured and killed some of those on board the vessel they had boarded. Included in the number of victims were male and female pilgrims returning from Mecca. The act horrified India. It also risked the capacity of the East India Company to go about their profitable business. England's King, William III, acted accordingly and put a large bounty on Every and his crew. There are reports that 6 of his men had been captured off the Irish coast in 1696, but Every himself had vanished and was never located. Through the discovery of these coins at various sites in New England, it seems he managed to escape by posing as a slave trader, by, well, actually becoming a slave trader, and making his way to the American colonies in order to settle there and live out the rest of his life in hiding. A Bronze Age slab, first uncovered in a French castle cellar in 1900, which was subsequently forgotten but then rediscovered in 2014, has been identified as the oldest three-dimensional map of a known area in Europe. Researchers believe it to be a representation of the River Odette Valley and that area's river network. According to BBC News, geolocation revealed the territory represented on the slab bears an 80% accuracy to an area around an 18-mile-long stretch of the river. Dr. Clement Nicholas from Bournemouth University asserts that it was probably a way to affirm the ownership of the territory by a small prince or king at that time. Further to this, he points out that we tend to underestimate the geographical knowledge of past societies. This slab is important, as it highlights this cartographical knowledge. A new paper by a triumvirate of Israeli archaeologists appears to offer groundbreaking insight into the motivation behind the creation of Paleolithic cave art. Researchers have long pondered over why this work would have so often been created in the depths of the earth and in pitch darkness. Who are these pieces for, and why? Well, according to this paper, the explanation is that they were creating predominantly for themselves in an altered state of consciousness. The cave artists would go into the poorly ventilated caves and would use flaming torches to light their way and their creative acts. The flames would be fed by the relatively sparse oxygen, reducing its availability for the artists. They would, it is argued, become hypoxic. Hypoxia is known to generate mental distortions, such as out-of-body experiences, hallucinations, and euphoria. The authors of the paper suggest that the cave art was not intended for people to communicate with each other, but with some other being or beings. Perhaps those they encountered during their hypoxic ecstasies. Staying on the topic of ancient fire, archaeological investigations in a cave on the southern edge of the Kalahari Desert have provided the date of roughly 900,000 BCE as the new secure date for the discovery of how to acquire and use fire by humans, even if it is thought to be unlikely that they knew how to make fire. Professor Richard Wrangham of Harvard University says that this find is extremely significant. He adds, "The South African discovery is a major step towards confirming that human exploitation of fire for cooking and defence did indeed drive key aspects of human evolution. I believe that early humans originally discovered how to use fire around 1.8 million years ago, and that the ability to cook food led to major, otherwise inexplicable changes in human gut anatomy, dentition, facial shape, and increased brain size that occurred at roughly that time." It has also been reported that this cave, known as the Wonderwork Cave, contains evidence that is much older than that connected to this early fire, because it has been reported that there is evidence that shows that an early form of human was occupying this site 2 million years ago. Further excavation and dating research is in the offing, but it may be several years before the findings from this will become available. 2 years ago, on the 15th of April 2019, fire ripped through the historic cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. It was devastating. However, there is, I think, a small silver lining for history lovers in the research that this fire has made possible. Last month, an article was published on sapiens.org by one of those researchers. As always, I will leave the full article linked in the description, but I also want to share some of the excerpts here. The day after the fire, a few colleagues and I decided to create an association to collect and preserve any and all information that we could. Our movement gathered more than 200 scientists in a couple of weeks, all willing to serve Notre Dame. Several dedicated working groups were set up on stone, wood, glass, metal, structure, heritage emotions, acoustics, and digital data. Ironically, it is actually far easier for us archaeologists to investigate the monument now than it was before the fire. Although the fire released a lot of lead, making it necessary for researchers to don protective clothing and abide by procedures to avoid lead toxicity, we no longer face the obstacles presented by floods of tourists on the site, and materials damaged by the fire are now more available for analysis. Together, we have learned a lot about the building, its materials, and the possibilities for reconstruction. The project is still ongoing. I, for one, will be watching on with interest. The site of the cabin of Ben Ross, father of Harriet Tubman, has been located at Maryland's Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. The first hint, we are told, was found in November by Julie Slobitsky, the chief archaeologist for Maryland's State Highway Administration, who, using a metal detector, found an 1808 coin imprinted with the word Liberty. Marcia Prodines, project leader at the Chesapeake Marshlands National Wildlife Refuge Complex, which includes Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, explains the significance of this find to understanding Harriet Tubman more fully, saying, "Landscapes and nature, they make us who we are. And to be able to share the story of how this particular parcel shaped the lives of Harriet Tubman, Ben Ross, and all the other people who worked that landscape back then, and share their stories, is something that we don't always get to do. This landscape is thought to offer context for Harriet Tubman's work on the Underground Railroad. It is thought that she spent time at this cabin in her youth, and that its location, surrounded by wetlands and woods, would have been an ideal space for her to learn, both how to survive to navigate her own escape from slavery, and also afterwards to help her in her missions to liberate others. Construction workers on an extensive restoration project at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence have uncovered a pair of frescoes depicting the rulers of Florence from the 16th and 17th century. Duke Ferdinando I de' Medici and his son, Duke Cosimo II de' Medici. These portraits are thought to have been covered up by plaster in the 18th century. They have not seen the light of day since then. The gallery of today was originally built by the Medici family as a governmental building that offered extra workspaces for the magistrates of Florence, which explains the visual branding on the walls. It's probably a good idea to remind the employees of who was the boss. A 5,000-year-old fingerprint has been discovered on a shard of pottery found on Orkney. It was left by the potter who created the ancient ceramic of which a fragment now remains. Excavation director Nick Card states, "Although finding the fingerprint impression won't hugely impact our work, it does give us a highly personal, poignant connection to the people of Neolithic Orkney, 5,000 years ago." With that being said, the article also refers to the fact that the researchers hope to further analyse the newly discovered fingerprint to determine the gender and age of the potter. On this, I must confess my total ignorance as to how it would be possible to determine these characteristics from a fingerprint. So if anybody is able to help me fill in the gaps in my knowledge, I'd be much obliged. And I will keep digging on my own as well, and hopefully the answer will be found before next month's video so that I can give an update on this. Last but by no means least is a headline that, to me, is peak pedant. I now present for your viewing pleasure, Stand Proud. BBC News are reporting on a dispute between the Northamptonshire Battlefield Society and the Royal Mail over the spelling on a stamp that has been issued to commemorate the 1469 Battle of Edgecote Moor. The Northamptonshire Battlefield Society being perplexed by the inclusion of a letter E in the middle of Edgecote that they say is incorrect. For them, no such place exists. I'm going to weigh in on this one. Look, I love a bit of pedantry as much as the next person, but when it comes to the spelling of the names of historically significant people and places, particularly when that significance is connected to a time before anyone had even thought of standardising spelling, which version you pick is up to you. With that being said, the modern location is without the E, so the stamps version might make a Google search a little bit harder. But to have Graham Evans, Secretary of the Northamptonshire Battlefield Society, assert that it was an important and much misunderstood battle, so it is sad to see such poor research and misinformation being propagated. In the last 2 years, we've done a lot to raise its profile and correct these errors. All feels like a bit of a reach to me. But at least BBC News is reporting on this misunderstood battle. So, profile raised and mission accomplished, I guess. But what do you think? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comment section underneath this video. Or you can come and find me over on social media. I'll leave links to my Instagram and Twitter in the description box. You can follow me there and we can continue these conversations. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, why not share it with your friends? Please also let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. If you think you're subscribed, maybe have a little check now to make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you. While you're there, checking or subscribing, why not hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.